Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Virtual Christmas Summit. Please do not unmute or interrupt the presenter, and feel free to put any questions or discussion in the chat. Today, we're going to have Bill Porter present a crash course in home automation and how AI saves me money on my display. I was lucky enough to see this about a few weeks ago in South Carolina, and it was amazing, and I'm anxious to watch it again. So take it away, Bill.
Oh man, that's quite an introduction. Thank you, sir. Yeah, my name is Bill Porter. Let me go ahead and jump right into that so I got the right slide up as I talk about that. I've been in this community for 10 years. I've been around a lot, but I'm usually somewhat quiet just because having kids does that and you don't get a lot of time on Facebook. For those that don't know me, I work for the US Navy as an electrical engineer. Mostly, I started doing robotics. I don't do robotics much anymore, but I can't tell you what I do. I'm an all-around geek. I actually started with Vixen in 2011, not on a house, but on my wedding attire, because our wedding attire in that picture had Vixen sequences embedded into it. This is a very old picture of my display from 4 or 5 years ago, of my modest little house and my display in front of it. I know a bunch of you just heard me say I'm an engineer and immediately started probably clicking the leave button because you know what engineers are like when it comes to teaching advanced topics. I understand that. Give me a chance. I've been told I'm very good at explaining advanced stuff to non-advanced people. And I give credit for the fact that I do a lot of things with STEM for the Navy. I host robotics competitions. I teach kids at elementary school. I show science to kids in elementary school. I teach high school teachers how to teach resistors and capacitors and things like that. So I've spent many years learning how to communicate effectively as an engineer. So give me a chance. This is one of the things like I said, I actually do international robotics competition where I'm the technical director. So this was last year's picture from the team that won, I believe. Yep. Anyway, what is AI? That's, I'm using that buzzword. It's probably not what the other people that are teaching AI today is calling AI. AI in this class is just going to be sort of automated vision recognition systems, aka security cameras that can tell you when a person is in that security camera feed or not. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my video so I'm not self-conscious about that for now. Okay. So what are we doing today? We're going to do a quick sprint into some uses of AI in our Christmas display. Again, this is mostly in regards to AI-based security camera systems. We're going to do a sprint into Home Assistant. Now that this is an online class and you guys are really close to monitors, I'm going to probably spend more time in Home Assistant, which is why I asked this to be a 90-minute class, even though when I teach this at minis, it's usually an hour-long class. We're going to do some demos that I have that, again, the demos were more meant to be done at events. So I sort of have figured out a way to demo it here. So we'll see how well that works. And my philosophy is always, there's not enough time today for me to teach you to be an expert. My goal is to teach you to know how to ask the right questions when you leave this session today. Google is a very powerful tool. But it's only as powerful as, giving it good questions. Or should I say ChatGPT is a good tool, but it's only a good tool if you can prompt it well enough. So continuing on, oh, that's not relevant to this. Was it? Well, okay, so last year, or 2 years ago, I used vision-based artificial intelligence to control my show, my snow machines, and my outdoor speakers. Some of the basic uses was if there weren't any cars or people watching my display, then my snow machines would not turn on. For those that don't have snow machines, because you live somewhere where snow is real, congratulations. I live in Florida. I have to use snow machines and the fluid gets very expensive. So looking back for how many times that script actuated, I believe I saved about $500 per season just in snow juice alone by making sure that my snow machines were not running when no one was there to watch my show. How did I do it? Well, it's complicated. I'm going to break down some technologies and terminology that I used. And again, this is a very complicated subject, and there's many ways to achieve the same effect that I'll talk about today. It's the same automations and things like that. I'm more going to focus on teaching a fundamental knowledge of the technologies used, and I'm going to show you how I did it. But just because I did it that way doesn't mean I'm saying you should do it that way, or that anyone did it a different way is wrong. It's just the way I did it as a explanation. But I try to focus on the enabling technologies and the core understanding of those technologies so that you know what you're doing when you go and try it. And you may try it a different way, and that's okay. It's like 5-volt versus 12-volt. It's just okay. They're all pixels. So anyway, high level, let's start. Ready? You point the camera at the street. So here's, a couple shots of my house where it's the view from the camera that is focused on my street. You can kind of get a overhead view of my house and the street that comes past my house. So that's where I expect cars to watch my show from, those orange squares there. So I make sure to focus my camera on where those cars will be. The camera has a sort of AI that can recognize objects and report in real time. So there's an example of someone watching my show where the AI says, I'm 92% confident that that object is a car. You do use a home automation hub to take that information from the camera and trigger some actions. And that is it. End of class. Any questions? No? Okay. Usually that's when everyone laughs because they realize that can't be the other presentation, but I don't know. I thought it was funny. Okay, fine. Let's go into some more detail. Whoop, jump ahead. Let's go into some more detail. We're going to break this into 3 sections right now. The camera and the AI detection system, some of the protocols that are used to communicate across the systems, and then we're going to talk about the home automation integration using Home Assistant. Quick forward thought though, what is your definition of a smart appliance? What does the word smart mean to you? Feel free to use the chat and throw up quickly what you believe when you see that your dishwasher is smart. What does it mean? What does that word smart mean when it comes to dishwashers or refrigerators or air conditioners? Like when it says it's a smart refrigerator, what does that mean to you? Jason says you have to you have to install an app. That's what Ted and Jason just put in comments. Any other? I'm interested to see what others definition of smart is when they see something can be smart.
IoT.
IoT. Device that has internet access. That's what Kik just said. Connected to the internet for no reason. Okay, I'll give it to you in that. Network connected, controllable, configurable. I like Jason's response. Web connected or remote operation. Nuno just said the same thing. I agree. I think smart means nothing. Really, it's a buzzword. For the most part, it means the device can talk and thus be controlled through other means than its usual, just push a button at the front of it kind of thing. Not every device that calls itself smart, though, can be controlled by third parties. And that's a key point to some of the stuff we're going to discuss today. This is a key to know for building a quote unquote smart house. If you want to know if a device is open or supports or is not hostile against third parties controlling it, a quick way to Google is smart device name and then Home Assistant. We'll get into what Home Assistant is in a bit, but the quick definition is it's the largest open source home automation software out there. So basically, if you want to know if your smart drying rack can be controlled remotely through a third party, if someone has done it in Home Assistant, the answer to that is yes. So let's start talking about some AI concepts when it comes to cameras and the way you train cameras to be able to recognize things like cars or people or monsters or anyone like that. How do you do that? Well, there's these concepts. One of them is called a label. A label is an object name, a person, car, mail truck, etc. An AI is trained with a data set or a large collection of these objects and photos that have been labeled. So you feed it, 1,000 different pictures of people where each picture has had a box drawn around the person and it's been labeled person. This is called supervised machine learning. When you buy AI-powered security camera products, this is already done. So this is kind of like how Ring works. This is a lot how the common camera systems that you know of today that says smart detections and things like that. That is how they're doing. I have used in the past an open source AI tool called OpenCV and TensorFlow, and that's already been trained with data sets with these common labels. And the demo that you will see today uses a Frigate NVR with AI processing done on a coprocessor called Google Coral. So don't worry, those will all be repeated, and we'll talk about what those things are in a second. So let's get on with it. So let's look at our first use case, a camera activating outdoor speakers. So, was this? This might have been out of order. I might have had a click problem earlier. Anyway, some camera vocab. Camera is an easy one. Network video recorder, that's NVR. So you'll hear me shorten that to NVR. This is in security camera systems. This is the device or computer that watches the cameras and watches and records the camera feeds. We're going to learn about RTSP. This is the protocol used to send video from a camera to an NVR. Artificial intelligence are used to classify objects in the camera image, and then a coprocessor is specialized hardware to run AI faster or better. And we'll look at those in a minute. So let's talk, now that we kind of understand how cameras work and how camera systems work, if you're trying to do what I've done, you need to work through some thought processes. The first thought process is picking a camera. You want a camera with some sort of physical zoom so that you can frame exactly where the audience will be for minimum errors, right? You want, and we'll talk about errors in a second, but you want, just like that picture in that slide shows, I don't want any of my own yard in the view if I can. I don't want to be looking into somebody else's yard if I can help it. I want it to only be framed where the actual audience will be with nothing else there. And again, you know, my house sort of lends itself to mounting a camera outside my garage door that has a high zoom. Excuse me, I've aimed it sort of down the road with that turn, and I've zoomed in so only my street is framed well. But what do you mean by errors, Bill? Well, if anyone's worried about AI taking over the world at all, when you start playing with AI, you realize that we're probably a long way off, because here's an instance where it thought that fence post was a person, that rock was a person for a little while, apparently. And this is a scene from a movie you may or may not be familiar with that resonates very well with AI experts. They really like this scene from this movie because how accurate it is when it comes to errors with AI. Let's see if I get this to play.
Machi, don't be scared.
Why are you clutching that large feral hog like it's a child?
That's not a feral hog. It's Machi.
What? Is that a dog or... Dog, pig, dog, pig, dog, pig, pig, dog. Loaf of bread, system error. Come on, guys, it's a dog.
So yes, that's a great interpretation of AI errors. I hope everyone could hear that. Are you guys actually able to hear that video? I didn't actually test my sound.
Yes, we could hear it.
Yes, okay, perfect. Perfect, all right. So yes, that's a great Hollywood representation of you know, how AI fails. And that's the problems that AI experts run into a lot, and you know, humorously represented. All right, so we have a camera now. I'm going to take a moment and again clarify. I'm going to walk you through how I did it. That's not, I want to be very clear, it's not how I recommend it. And it's also not how I'm probably going to do it in the future. This is just how I did it, and it was for reasons that I didn't put a lot of planning into this. I just sort of woke up one night, had an idea, woke up one day, had an idea, and used my existing infrastructure to implement that idea. So I'm going to walk you through what I did based on what my existing infrastructure was, but I don't want you writing down, this is what Bill said to go and do. It's just what Bill did because he had it running already. I had a full security system run by a software package called Blue Iris that ran on a server with third-party cameras that could do RTSP streams to that software package. That software package had AI integration from either DeepStack or CodeProject.ai. If I were doing this again, and I probably will change my setup somewhat, and what I'm recommending you do is don't use Blue Iris, but to use Frigate. And we'll talk about Frigate a little later on. But again, just to be clear, I'm walking you through how I did it. That's not saying that's how I'm telling you should do it. Here's an example of Blue Iris. Again, this is a security camera software suite, so that's prime usage is just you know, managing security cameras, recording and motion alerts and things like that. If you are already in the market for a good security camera system for your house for other reasons, and you may just want to also have it help you with your show, and you like things to be easy, I recommend Ubiquiti Unify Protect. It definitely makes things easy. There's a pretty robust Home Assistant integration that you can find for it, but it's very much more like just plug and play for both security systems and for AI integration with things that your cameras can tell you. But it is expensive, so it's one of those things where you're trading your own time for money you spent, if that's the good trade for you. If you'd rather spend time and not money, a Frigate on a Raspberry Pi is a great way to start. If you're going to leave this class today and want to run Home Assistant yourself, you can actually install Frigate into a Docker on Home Assistant on the same Raspberry Pi. Both of them are really good ways to try out Frigate. Frigate is a little bit of a steep learning curve because there's no graphical way to configure it. You sort of write out the configuration in a config file and then just see if your config file crashes Frigate or not. And that's sort of your indication that you did it correctly or not. It's much like installing FPP on a Pi, and Home Assistant's the same way, and we'll talk about that later. The Home Assistant integration is on a little bit of a rocky ground right now for Unify. Hopefully it stays working well. Yeah, Brett, I'm actually the one that's made a lot of noise about that in the different places and gotten some heated responses from Unify, but that's sort of outside the scope of this class. Why do these camera systems add AI? Well, if anyone here has had an old camera system in the past, you probably will be quick to point out that it sucked when it came to notifications, because a rolling bag down the street would create a notification. A leaf blowing in the wind would trigger your cameras that someone was in your, approaching your house. False alarms were very high back when camera systems only relied on motion for detections. They became much more accurate when they've added this AI, where the AI can confidently say, hey, this wasn't just a leaf blowing across the camera, there's actually a person in your backyard because I can see the person. This is more or less what Ring did for Ring to get really good at, correct kind of detections. But this is why security cameras have worked hard to add AI, just to solve that problem with too many false detections. By adding AI, we got rid of these false positives. We only get alerted when it's an actual person in theory. And we can set different alerts for, is it a car, truck, cat, dog, etc. Quick note, pixel shows and security cameras. Who here has ever been extremely frustrated the first time they set up their pixel show and had non-stop detections because the cameras were being driven crazy by your pixel light? Yeah, pixel light, the motion of your pixel show is going to wreak havoc on your security cameras, even ones with AI, since they usually are internally set up to use motion first to trigger the AI processing. So this also goes back to why framing your image in your camera is very important, to not include your own pixel show. Jason says, I had to turn off my IR auto on during Christmas season. My IR filter would constantly click on and off. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that happens when your cameras are pointed at your props or your pixels. Skipping this. All right, so let's talk about, I think I'm missing some slides. Oh well. Let's talk about MQTT. I hope the AI will detect a loaf of bread. Oh man. All right, so what is MQTT? Okay, we'll get into this right now. MQTT stands for Message Queuing Telemetry Transport. It is an extremely light, simple, and lightweight messaging protocol that has a publish and subscribe method designed for limited devices, networks with high latency, low bandwidth, or unreliable networks. So this is more or less one of the few standards. It's very common across home automation and other types of IoT type use cases. If you're going to get into home automation, you're going to get into MQTT very quickly, which is why I have this segment in my presentation right now. Just in that last hour in Dan's class, someone was asking questions about the MQTT page in FPP. And it was, I kind of pointed out, come to my classes, I'm going to cover this. That's what I'm doing now. So this is going to be 10 minutes to make everyone in this room, all 64 of you, MQTT experts, just like Mr. Ken looking at My Little Pony here. And the reason I'm going to start this out with anyone who's familiar with the Windows registry. I have a feeling a lot of you are familiar with ever dealing with the Windows registry. MQTT I best describe as it's like the Windows registry, but on a network. So let's sort of think of that registry example in our heads as we read through this. First of all, you have a broker. The broker is the server that contains the MQTT database. So this is like a computer with a registry in it. There's only one broker. It needs to be somewhere, and everything needs to be pointed towards that broker. That broker is where the MQTT database officially sits. That's where all the data is stored. A client is any device or system that wants access to that data. A topic is a piece of data in the MQTT database. So think of it like a registry key. It's actually very much in the same, what's the word? It looks like registry keys, the way you can set up hierarchy and things like that. Syntax, it's very much like in the same syntax as the registry. The act of publishing is when a client sends data to the server. So it is publishing data to the server, and anything that is subscribed to that data will get a notification that that data has changed. So for example, let's apply that right now. You have your MQTT broker, which is your one server that exists in your system. You have things like temperature sensors that are publishing data to that broker. And then you have other clients that are subscribed to that data so that when that temperature sensor updates the value of the sensor, that's what it's reading, then your display in your kitchen, which is subscribed to that piece of data, will get notified, hey, I've got a new reading for you. Here's the new reading. So we should all be MQTT experts. So let's apply what we just learned to my setup. I had to set up a broker somewhere in my network at my house. So I have a broker that's actually built into my Home Assistant. So the person asking where does that MQTT messaging go in Dan's class, that goes to your broker. You actually have to go into your FTP settings and tell it where the IP address of your broker, and that's where your MQTT messages go. So for example, what I did is I had Blue Iris publish to some topics in my MQTT database. It would set the key, the quote unquote key or value of Blue Iris /streetcam /detect human to true. I had some home automation systems subscribe to the same topics to get notified when that happened. And that system would then turn on my speakers. Oh, excuse me, take a drink of water. All right, so what home assistant? What home automation system, Bill? Okay, well, finally, let's talk about Home Assistant. Home Assistant, I believe, claims that they are the largest open source project on GitHub now. They think of it as FPP of home automation. It is literally the best thing I've ever seen. And I will drive you to why I make that statement in a few minutes, but it's super awesome. To describe what it is, it's an open source, community-driven home automation hub, and it connects all the things. Inside its system, you can do scripting. There's a scripting-like language to build up automations. There's also really good GUI now to be able to do it. And you can make automations like when an MQTT topic changes, turn on my Yamaha smart stereo in my garage. And that should be your light bulb moment that just connected how my entire system worked for that. When I got into Home Assistant 3 or 4 years ago, the learning curve was very steep. It has gotten much better. They've made drastic improvements for those that like to self-educate just by going and doing and struggling through it until you figure it out. It's much more aimed for you sort of people now. And I'm one of those, so I'm making fun of myself here. It used to be very obtuse where you had to learn that in order to turn on a light, you had to quote unquote call service turn on. Now it just says you drop down the device and it gives you examples for the ways you can use that device, like turning it on. It is very much like X-Lights and FPP that there are great YouTube videos covering it, like Jason's pointing out. But I will also warn it suffers the same problem where YouTube videos can become out of date, or what they're showing you does not look like what you have now because of the updates to the interface. You can almost certainly Google for days. You can almost certainly ask ChatGPT to write you automations as well. So there's a lot of resources out there. I'm supposed to do things. So we talked about the turning on my speakers when my camera sees a person. So let's do a few things right now. We are going to expand this window. I hope I'm not breaking Zoom by expanding my sharing window. Okay, let's do that. Here is my Home Assistant interface I've created for this demo. Then I shot of me sitting down about an hour ago, eating lunch while watching Dan's presentation in that camera. That camera is currently pointed at the Bessie desk in my Florida room. I'm gonna pan that around to have it point at me. Should start detecting me. There it goes. So you see that bounding box around me is the AI saying, hey, there's a person here. It is now updated Home Assistant to say, hey, I've detected a person, and here it is. And you can kind of see that this person counts as one object, and the person occupancy is detected. Just catching up on comments real quick, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go back to Frigate. So actually, now I'm gonna go to FPP. And I'm going to turn on my camera to show my pixels. So I'm going to start a show in my FPP. You should be able to hear it as well. So you should, hopefully you guys can hear the music playing. You can kind of see a show going on my pixels here. I'm going to go back to my camera and I'm going to turn it. And if you noticed, the sound stopped, but the pixels are still going. You'll notice my FPP volume now is suddenly set to 0. I promised I did not just pull it up on my phone and do that. So let me turn my camera back at me. Sound's back on. You can see my FPP is turned up again. So this was an example of how I set up my speakers in my front yard. What happened here is Frigate and its AI detecting me sitting here was triggered through this integration. No, I'm sorry, this automation. You can see it was last triggered 24 seconds ago on and off. And we should actually see a trace of it. And I'll walk you through what this is in a second. It basically said, it checked. Okay, well, that's probably not a good thing to do. So when the turret camera, which is that camera, person occupancy becomes occupied, first of all, let's confirm Falcon player is playing. And if so, call service, set volume on Falcon player to 70%. That's when it turns the speakers on. When the speakers turned off, this was when turret camera person occupancy became not occupied. I'm still confirming Falcon player is playing. I'm calling service media player, set volume on Falcon player to 0. So again, this demo was for, this is my road kit for teaching this class. Obviously, if you have your proper light show, you don't want to be just having FPP shut its volume all the way down, because then you wouldn't get your FM transmitters working anymore. What I do in my actual house, which I'll bring up later, is I actually turn on and off my stereo. But since this was part of my road kit for teaching this class in a couple of different states, it was just easier to have the automation turn FPP up and down. But this was all through Home Assistant creating that connection. So that was that demo. We'll come back in some other demos. Again, we got 90 minutes, so I'm still making pretty good time. Some conversations going on in chat. But Bill, you promised me some money saving tips, and I've already told you about all the money you're going to spend to do stuff like this. I'm like, okay, well, that's true. So again, let's go back to my snow machines. I had snow machines 2 years ago, and to be honest, I don't even need a pixel light show anymore. I could just put up some static lights and just have the snow machines out there, and it would be all the same reactions that I get now. And that probably has to do with me being in Florida, so everyone that comes hasn't probably seen snow. But what happens usually is there'll be a line of cars watching my show for 1 or 2 songs, and then a song that has a snow machine activated in it will come on, and then immediately all the doors will fly open. The kids come running out and they're running through the snow because they think it's the best thing ever, and they're not even paying attention to my light show anymore. So kids absolutely love them. My wallet didn't. You know, I was using $25 a day in snow fluid. And I added that up to be $800 per season. And my show is only 6 songs, and only 2 or 3 of those songs had the snow machine in it, and they only had it for 30 seconds. So 30 seconds times 3 songs in a 6-song playlist times a season was $800 per season estimate I was spending. And what quickly, yeah, same logic can be applied to 5 machines too. That's true, Clem. What quickly ended up hurting me is when I'd look out at my front yard, and at that moment, my snow machines were running and there was no one watching my show. And I'm like, okay, we've got to find a better way. I don't want to keep running snow machines if it doesn't actually benefit anyone out there watching it. So here's the plan. Home Assistant reads what sequence is playing. Yes, it can do that, and I'll go over that in a moment. If it's, do you want to build a snowman, then publish a MQTT message that forces Blue Iris to run a few frames through its AI to look for cars or pedestrians. I did it this way because that solves some motion sensor issues by forcing Blue Iris to process its AI on demand. It got rid of those motion sensor issues. If Blue Iris saw a human or a vehicle, it would publish a response, a message saying so in MQTT. Home Assistant would see the new topic change and activate a smart plug that the snow machines were attached to. So when I added snow machines, I didn't actually sequence them in at all at the X-Lights level. The only thing I did was have Home Assistant turn on the snow machines on certain songs based off what information it could see in real time. So if it was looking for a couple different types of sequences, like one of them was, do you want to build a snowman? If that was the one playing and the camera saw a person, it would turn on the snow machine. And this is sort of what it looks like from the Home Assistant interface. There's 2 ways to work with Home Assistant. You can do the text editor and actually write your own script on the right here, or you can use the graphical user interface and just do drop downs, and that's what's on the left. But you can kind of read through this for a moment, and you can see everything I just described for how this works. When the title of an FPP is, do you want to build a snowman? Publish a message, wait, check the response. If the response says a person's there, turn on the appliance module, wait 60 seconds and turn off the appliance module. And that's how my snow machines operated. So I'm going to show you a demo of that. It's probably not going to be very unmeaningful without understanding what's going on. The demo is me standing in front of my light show. I'm the only one on the street holding a camera, and the song comes on that triggers the snow machines, and you should see them being triggered. Now, anyone could replicate that just by sequencing of, you know, an output to turn on a snow machine, but that's not what happened in this case. What happened was the camera only turned on the snow machine, or the Home Assistant only turned on the snow machine because the camera watched me filming my light show in the front yard. So here we go. So again, that could have been scripted in X-Lights, but it was not. That was FPP recognizing Home Assistant recognizing what sequence is being played in FPP, checking the camera, looking at the street, seeing me standing there like an idiot, filming back at it, and then turning on the snow machine because it recognized me as a person. So it worked. So this is sort of a wrap up of when I threw this together. It worked scary great. And, you know, I implemented this in a day, in about an hour, with just an idea I had. I never went back and optimized it because it just worked. You saw that I had like a 7-second delay to allow the camera to process and feed through. I don't know if I need that. If you are someone that wants super tight activation of your snow machines at a certain moment, you could set up some sort of way to gate or block or let through a trigger from an AC controller. That way it's sort of a, you know, you can correlate the timing in X lights, but you have a system to gate or, you know, not allow the activation through if you want to do it that way. Getting into some helpful automations, I ended up building my own pool controller in Home Assistant where it would read the temperature of my pool and read my weather station weather data for my, you know, what was happening at my house in real time, and then make decisions to either run my pool water through the heating pads on the roof or through my heat pump or both to heat the pool most cost effectively. One of the most simple but most valuable integrations that we have in our household. Oh, Brett, like my pool controller. Some of the helpful automations in my house was my Yamaha movie theater stereo in my living room is smart, and I highly recommend if you're going to be in the market for a new stereo for your home theater or for setting speakers outside. Yamaha receivers with MusicCast integrate very, very well. They support local communications with Home Assistant. And you know, my Home Assistant's able to see when I turn on my TV through my Yamaha, and it'll turn off my very loud dehumidifier that's in my living room because it's Florida and we love breathing our water in our air. When my TV turns off through that is detected by my Yamaha, then my very loud dehumidifier will turn back on. So Clem asked, the camera detections make it magical, but would a button press station be more efficient? And I assume you mean your for turning on your speakers. I did that one year and I got really irritated looking out at people watching my light show that didn't notice the button and they were just watching it in pure silence. And that frustrated me. So I already don't trust, I guess he means for the snow machines. I already don't trust people to see signs and push buttons because they're too mesmerized by the lights. So yeah, someone just said, I echo that, and the push button, like people are afraid to push a button that says push me. I'm not even sure they're afraid, they're just not paying attention. And I feel bummed out when I do all this work and they either don't listen to it or don't get snow because they didn't go and press the button. So to me, the camera was a fail-safe. I don't have to worry about them going and pressing a button. Moving on. Some other automations I set up in my house that once I really got Home Assistant going, all my outdoor lights around my house were tied to smart switches already, or I add smart switches to control them, but they're not motion sensing lights. When I added security cameras around my house, I went, well, this is easy. I don't need to change out my lights to be motion sensing lights. I can just have Home Assistant turn on my outside lights when the camera sees a person there. So I can walk around my house reliably and have my lights come on and off like they would be motion lights, except I'd actually argue they're better than motion lights because now things like wind or you know, animals aren't triggering my lights if I don't want them to. Only actual people trigger my lights because they only get triggered when the AI says there's a person there. A great one when you're getting to be a father, if you know, a father like yourself and you're really upset about people running the air conditioner when they shouldn't be. My house already had an ADT alarm system that I decommissioned, but then I installed a little widget called Eyes On, Invisalink 4, I think is what it's called, that allows me to still use my alarm system without paying for ADT. Well, guess what? There's a Home Assistant integration for that allows you to have all your windows be sensors in Home Assistant. So now I have automation set up that if any one of my family opens a window, my air conditioner turns off automatically. And when the window's closed, the air conditioning will turn back on automatically. You can also do things like automate your hurricane trophy. So when your town is destroyed by Category 5 hurricane, and you're in the process of helping them dig out, and you got a trophy for that, you can have your trophy activated by a Home Assistant. Basically, once you bring all your controllable stuff in your house to one hub, one place that enables you to put together logic to have one thing control another, the possibilities are endless, right? One of the automations that my wife loves right now, that we have a 2-year-old daughter who just turned 2. She's got a smart speaker in her room to play lullabies. right now, in the middle of the day, once that smart speaker is asked to play music, our doorbell goes into do not disturb mode. So that way, when UPS rings the doorbell, we only get it on our phones and not the actual chime in the house. And then once the light turns back on because our daughter has woken up, that stops the music in the smart speaker, and then our doorbell turns back to normal mode so that the chime will work when it's pressed. So just linking, the status of the smart speaker in my daughter's room to being able to disable our doorbell as one wife approval factor, because now our daughter is woken up less by UPS delivering packages in the middle of the day. I'm sure some of you are itching to ask the question I get a lot at these events, and they ask, have you done AI car counting or person counting? I have not done that. I know some people have, I think, played with it with more basic sort of, OpenCV type systems. I'm not sure if someone's done it with true object detection AI. So I can't tell you how to do it. But I know some people have worked on it. You can probably Google it. There's some people that are working on training a model of what their mail truck specifically looks like, so that way you get a specific notification that your mail was delivered, not just that a truck walked down, drove down your street. And there's also, you can train models for faces, and that way you can have your house detect your specific face and do something like unlock the door or turn on a light for you when you approach it, kind of thing. Those are just more add-on AI type ideas that this is enabling you to go and pursue. It's just I don't have anything to show you in that regard. Now, I do want to talk about my demo that you're looking at in my camera right now. If you look right in the very middle of my camera, there's a Dell Slim client. It's like a 8000 or 9000 series Intel Dell thin client that I got off eBay for $200. Again, I built this whole demo to go to different events. It's been to California once, it's been to South Carolina. It's actually been California twice, but that was just on the way to South Carolina. It's been to Florida, it's been everywhere. So I was trying to make something that was small and packageable. What I did is I had that client has a virtual machine hypervisor called Proxmox, and it has some guest clients in it. That's where my Frigate is installed in a container. That's where my Home Assistant is installed in a virtual machine. And that's where I have FPP installed in a virtual machine. It can even have a router, but right now I have its internal router turned off. I'm using the external router that you can see in the video camera. Someone's asked to clarify, Frigate adds AI processing capabilities even for cameras like old Real Links that only have basic motion detection. Yes, let's clarify quickly again. Frigate is an NVR. Remember what an NVR is? Is it something that watches your camera and does the AI processing? It'll work with any camera that exists as long as that camera supports RTSP streaming. So if your old Real Links can do RTSP streaming, then yes, Frigate can add AI detection stuff to it. What you're gonna want to buy something to go with Frigate called Google Coral, because Google Coral is the coprocessor that hardware enables a lot of that API. Yeah, someone just said, are you using a Coral TPU? So inside that Dell Slimline, I have an M.2 Coral inside of it. So that Dell server has an internal Coral in it. In the picture right below, I don't know if you can see it, the USB version of Coral, I don't know if you can see my laser pointer is right there, just for illustrative purposes. That's the USB version. That's a little bit more expensive because it's more popular. Inside that Dell computer, I actually have the M.2 version of Coral. So that's all running inside that computer. Plus, the Pixel stick is my generic Pixel controller that I'm using to run my snowflakes right there. That's what's inside this beige box is my Pixel stick. I actually helped with some of the early developments of Pixel Stick way early in the beginning, mostly in regards to its serial support. But that's just getting raw data from FPP. FPP is running my show. So to walk through that live demo that you may have seen already that we're going to show in a minute, and I actually need to walk you through it too. I'm sorry, this is still the demo for controlling stuff, right? So the camera is watched by Frigate. Frigate does the AI processing. it sends an MQTT message, basically the details of what AI sees. That goes into Home Assistant. That's what everything connects to. Home Assistant can also control FPP. FPP is interacting with Home Assistant also through MQTT. And then FPP is what's sending pixel data to my pixel stick. So here's an interesting use case that I'll demonstrate in a moment. How to tell if your pixel light show has an issue. And by issue, I mean a prop is malfunctioning or a pixel needs replaced. Well, let's think through this real quick. Let's think of what happens when you get a bad pixel. Typically, when you get a bad pixel, you either have a pixel stuck on when it should be off, or stuck off when it should be on. And usually it affects itself plus all the pixels after it, right? Either all the pixels are stuck on after it, or all the pixels are stuck off after it. Either way, the power consumed by the pixels during a failure will not be as expected. So if we did something where ahead of time, we measured the power that the pixels draw when we knew they were working, and then later on we compare what they're actually drawing now, we can use that to determine if they're working or not based on their power draw. This is actually a very common approach to detecting health of robotic systems or other types of systems is, am I drawing the power that I expect to be drawing? If I'm drawing more or if I'm drawing less, that is an indication that something is malfunctioning. There's only one downside to this, is that if you make changes, if you add or subtract props to your controllers, you need to re-baseline your power consumption. So what have I done here? I'm gonna stop share for a moment and concentrate on my camera stream. Hopefully, I think that should make my video feed larger. If you look at this board here, I've got a smart plug down here. Hopefully you can see my red laser pointer. I wish I had a brighter one. That smart plug is a Wi-Fi smart plug that can measure power. That is what's plugged into my power supply that feeds my pixel controller right there. Pixel controller, power supply, plugged into smart plug. So let's try this demo. Let me switch my audio. I can no, I think they heard it. Alexa, test my pixels.
Okay. Light show is functioning correctly.
So what that did is it turned on, quote unquote, all my props, which in this case is just my 4 snowflakes, turned them on for a couple seconds to let the power current measurement settle, read what that current measurement was, compared it to what it should be, and then determined there's nothing wrong. So now let me go and unplug one of my props, which is a good, analog to a pixel failing, right? The pixel failed in one of these snowflakes, all the pixels after that pixel wouldn't work. So let me go demonstrate that by unplugging one of my snowflakes. Give me a second. So, yes, someone just pointed out that my snowflakes had a bottom pixel not lit. When I put together this demo many months ago, I was using the early versions of FPP8. And I actually found some bugs and reported them, including that the first pixel in every model were not lighting up. I just haven't updated my FPP since they fixed that. So that's why you saw one pixel out. There's always one person that spots the pixel out. Anyway, Alexa, test my pixels.
Okay. Light show has a problem.
So this time when it did the same test, the current was outside of specifications according to the smart plug. And the script I wrote now just said, okay, since it's outside specifications, you must have a bad pixel. And that's how that demo works. So let's go back to screen share. Okay. So again, that whole demo is basically just saying, since I can measure the current running to my pixel controller, which is what feeds power to my pixels, if that current is not as it should be, then I can determine that I have a problem with my light show. Now, I believe there are people coming out with pixel controllers nowadays that can measure current at each port in the pixels for the same sort of use cases. This demo, the way I did it does not require you to buy new pixel controllers. I just bought that $7 smart plug. And let me show you what they look like. Give me a second. This is the part where I'm not well rehearsed because I'm going a little deeper into it than I do when I take this on the road. So this is the smart plug that I recommend. It is an ESP8266 based smart plug. What's nice about it is it's only $7 or $8. Now, it comes from China. I'm okay using China, hardware that comes from China. I don't like putting software running on this onto my network, but there's a great open source community called Tasmoda that allows you to flash open source firmware onto devices like this. And what you'll do is you'll take it apart. So it's taken apart at this level. You'll solder 4 wires to it. And the solder pads are very easy to solder to. It's almost like it was meant to be soldered to. And then you get a little USB to serial adapter, and then you can flash the software on this with Tasmoda. And then now that solves my concern about having a Chinese device on my network because their software is now gone. It's now open source software that I can trust running on my network. So I will probably get you a link at the end of the class, but this is all called Sonoff. So this is the Sonoff S31 smart plug. This is the one that can read the power that flows through it, which is good because that's how that demo worked. It's off based on the power that this plug is reading. So let's see what's next. So we're going to do some, I'm going to walk you, since I've got some more time, we're going to walk through some of my code in a minute, because I think I saw in chat that people were asking about it, and I lost my chat window, so I don't even know where it went. Chat, there we go. Very cool. This idea, especially bringing a desired state config test to a light display. This uses a current transformer. It's more or less a current transformer. I think it's just is it a shunt-based system? No, it is a current transformer. So that's the current transformer on it right there for measuring current. To answer that question, how do you get AI to automatically fix the issue too? That's a good point. It looks like the Sonoff plug ESP Home works too. I have not got into ESP Home yet, Chad. I've been doing Tasmoda. I do have some devices though, I think are only supported by ESP Home. I just haven't gotten around to it. But from what I found, at least in my experience, the Sonoff type devices are very common, and there's lots of good resources to flashing them and using them. So before I pull up my interfaces and walk through some of those demos you just saw in detail, any further questions on what I talked about as far as an approach or what I was doing here? I do want to make it clear that I was not the first person to do this on their light show. And again, the whole idea of measuring power to determine something being broken or not is a very common approach to many sophisticated systems and has been for decades. So this is not reinventing, this is not new in any sense or novel, it's just someone implementing it. It'd be cool if it can identify what string or pixel had the issue to make fixing problems easier than sending the data to see which doesn't respond. That would be cool, and that's very possible, and we'll talk about that in a second. So why don't we just jump into that a little bit more based on that question? How could you expand that for it to actually see what profit is? Now, oh, that's a great picture of myself. Let me switch cameras so we can go back to looking at the snowflakes. You'll notice in my Home Assistant interface here, it has, what have I done? So let's walk through a couple things. First of all, let's pull up FPP, because to be honest, FPP plays a big role here. This is a pretty standard FPP setup. We talked about how I have my output is just some E131 data to my Pixel controller. What I have installed is I've installed the Home Assistant plugin. And the other thing I've done, if you're using FPP as a Pixel controller or your show controller, you'll remember when you use FPP Connect and Xlights, there's that checkbox that says upload models. That is a more important checkbox if you ever want to do stuff like this. And this is actually part of my presentation that I call why you never need to use WLED again if you have an FPP-based system in your light show. Because you can easily replicate all of WLED's functionality with Home Assistant and FPP the way I'm going to show it here in a moment. But basically, if you've uploaded your models to FPP, which means if you go to the testing interface, you actually see your model. So in my case, I uploaded 5 snowflakes. Since FPP knows about your actual models now, in Home Assistant, you can publish, quote unquote, publish those models to MQTT basically. So you'll have listed your models here, you'll have enabled them. And once you've enabled them, Home Assistant will see them like it's a light bulb or an object. So right now I have individual control of my snowflakes, like there's snowflake 1. I can turn it on and off like it's a smart light. And this is only working because Home Assistant is sending a message to FPP to turn on ChromaFlake 1, and it's doing that through MQTT. And it only knows about all of this because when I set this up in Xlights and did FPP sync, not FPP sync, FPP connect, I checked that box in FPP connect to actually publish my models to FPP. So then FPP knew about my models. Since FPP knows about my models, it published them to Home Assistant. And now in my Home Assistant interface, I can control each snowflake as an individual model in real time. For example, that first snowflake, I can be like, you know what? Right now I'm angry, so I'm going to make some red snowflakes. So I made that one red. I can make this one green because I'm not really angry. I'm just in a festive mood. So there's a green snowflake. Let's just go ahead and complete the RGB triangle, make that other snowflake blue. So I'm basically controlling my models plugged into a generic pixel stick. Oh, that's a good photo it just took of me. Generic pixel stick pixel controller, and I'm using it like I would use WLED, but it's behaving like that, but it's just all through FPP. Can you build a virtual light dashboard in Home Assistant that reflects each model display output? Probably. I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but the dashboard in Home Assistant is very configurable, so that's something you can absolutely do. Let me turn this off again. Now you can see I can turn all the snowflakes off. So basically, if you have props up year-round and they're plugged into an FPP-based pixel controller, or even better, if you have FPP as your master controller and you have anyone's pixel controller, you can treat those year-round objects like you would with WLED as something that a smart assistant can turn on. Now, I don't think I've published my ChromaFlakes. Oh no, I think I did. So let's Alexa, set snowflakes color red.
Okay,
So there you go. Alexa, set snowflakes color blue.
okay,
So again, this works like it would like WLED, except I didn't have to buy a WLED controller. I'm still using my Christmas season pixel controller and my Christmas season FPP based system, and it's all working. Alexa, turn off snowflakes.
okay,
So this is sort of working through Home Assistant in a sense. Home Assistant is controlling FPP, but Home Assistant is also what my Amazon Alexa is tied to, because I integrated my that particular Alexa account to that Home Assistant account. And that's how that capability is currently working. I was going to do something fun for everyone that's still here. I'm going to put a link in chat that should get you access to this actual interface. Let's see if this works. So if you go here, you should be able to click that. It's going to ask you to sign in. And you're going to type in VCS is the password, and VCS is or username and password is VCS. And you should be able to see this right now. And let's see if we can get in and turn on my snowflakes fastest. Oh, they're turned on. Someone turned them on. There you go. This is probably going to crash when everyone tries to do it. All 64 people that are in here. But everyone should be able to see my Home Assistant interface now. You can poke at turning my snowflakes on or off. Oh yeah, they're going crazy. You guys are having fun. But more importantly, you can also click settings in here. You can click automation scenes and scripts, and you can actually read through some of how this worked. So the test of my pixels is a script for the person that was asking to share my script. Well, I don't have to now because you can just go read it. You can either read it in this interface, or you can actually go up here and say switch to YAML, and there's the YAML, which is the text interface. Or you can switch back to visual editor. And here's how this is my script that runs to test my pixels. Someone just turned off my smart plug, which turned off my pixel controller. So now if anyone else wants to run my pixels, you can't. Someone turned off the smart plug. Yep, snowflakes will not work now since someone just rebooted my pixel stick. Oh, now they're on. There you go. You'll also notice you can actually control FPP through here. So if you're watching my Falcon Pi player blue up in the corner, if I actually go play, oh, someone already figured it out. So someone started the show through my home assistant. And then someone else went and paused it, or they went and paused it. I will say, everyone that has a spouse in this room, I have to expect your spouse is not as excited about your smart home as you are. And my spouse was not really into installing 6 different apps to be able to control things in her house. But once I started doing Home Assistant and putting everything in one interface, now my wife actually appreciates that and is using my smart home now. So the other thing that's really good with Home Assistant is by putting everything on one interface, it's a little bit easier for everyone in your house to use. Okay, let's see if I'm caught up in any questions. If I've missed a question, please repeat it because there's a lot of conversations going on in that chat, so I'm kind of behind. I'll walk you through. So this is what I gave you access to is just my. Oh, Kevin, you're gonna have to watch the video. The Home Assistant you're in right now is just my demo Home Assistant that's running on that little Dell PC right there. This is my actual Home Assistant interface for my house. It's much more populated, obviously. There's much more sophisticated dashboards and dashboard schemes that I haven't used yet. I've only sort of used the basic dashboard and edited it, but I created basically tabs that represent rooms in my house. And in that room, like this is my daughter, this is the music that's playing on her smart speaker right now. This is the temperature in that room. Here's the controls I can do right now. You can notice the silent mode that I talked about with our doorbell is currently enabled. I could turn the light on her and wake her up and get in trouble with my wife. There's my son's room, his temperature, his smart speaker, some of his controls. Here's where I am in my messy Florida room. Hello, with its air conditioner that is currently on, so I'm not sure why it says off. But yeah, I can turn on my living room lights, dining room, there's my thermostat. Here's my controls for the stereo and things like that. You can get let's see. I built my own power wall, and so I built my own interface in Home Assistant to monitor my own power wall, so that's how much power my house is using right now. I actually wrote scripts to do a storm mode to put my power wall into a more battery, prioritized battery percentage storm mode based on weather alerts. That's kind of why the weather alerts are here. There's my electric vehicle charger. I can tell what my electric vehicle is doing. I can integrate things like it can watch my smart plugs. So let's see, here's my smart plugs that measure currents. So I started setting up for this around 9 or 10 today. So there's my power usage in this computer that I'm sitting at right now, going up since I'm here. I think this also, if I go back in time, or you can see when I charged my car. So that's when we charged our car for a little while and put some energy into my car. Here's where my solar production was for that day. This is all sort of interfaces that you can set up in Home Assistant. Someone says when you can remotely, when you remotely turn off lights on your spouse, they love it. Yeah, that gets old pretty quick, I think. Someone said Home Assistant is awesome. It turns into another tinkering hobby. I do agree. Geez, there's like a lot of comments on that one. Someone's asking what smart plugs do you use to monitor power consumption? I guess you weren't here earlier, Mike. The ones I'm using are Sonoff. There are different other ones. I just like Sonoff because they were $7. So here's the Sonoff S31. I flashed it with Tasmota, so it wouldn't have Chinese software on it. And these are $7 on Amazon. Anything else? I talked about like my security, my home alarm, my alarm system that is an unmonitored ADT alarm I can control through Home Assistant. And it tells me the status of all the sensors in the windows, things like that. There's outside my house. Here's my pool controller, the person that talked about my pool control. So I basically can set up what I want my desired pool temperature to be, min and max, what the temperature currently is, and controls the pool pump and pool solar valves and things like that. So this has been unavailable since yesterday, so that's not good. I can figure out what's going on there. But yeah, so that's my personal Home Assistant. This is back to the one that you guys have access to that you're just leaving my snowflakes on. Thanks for that. All right, I think I've probably gone into detail from what I wanted. What is the scripting language and how does it compare to other options? So it is YAML settings, which you can do what I'm doing right now since I gave you guys the link to this, but like you can actually go and set this to edit in YAML, and that's the YAML configuration. Is it all Wi-Fi using Zigbee and Z-Wave? I am using all Wi-Fi. I used to have a completely Insteon based system up until 2 years ago when Insteon decided to disappear. And I left such a bad taste in my mouth. I really don't want to get into another other RF system that I'd rather just have everything on Wi-Fi. So I use Wi-Fi stuff if I can. Yeah, Home Assistant has done a ton of work where you don't need to use YAML. I agree. For example, if I want to start a new automation, I can click new, create new, and you could say create new automation, add trigger. Trigger would be like a device. You can then go and look for a device. So I could say when Tasmoda energy changes, I can create automations like when the smart plug is turned on or off. It's a lot easier now that they put a lot of work into this interface. Oh, Scott and Matter. Scott knows I don't like Matter. Did you isolate all smart home data to its own net or subnet? Yes, I do have an IoT Wi-Fi SSID that's a different subnet. So all my Home Assistant stuff, including my Home Assistant, is actually on my interface of that network. It's not on my home network. I have put my IoT stuff on a different VLAN. Shoot, was there going to be anything else I was going to show you? I don't think so.
Bill, real quick question. Oop, I'm getting feedback. The Home Assistant plugin in FEP is not really a Home Assistant, right? It's just an MQTT broker, because that's not really installing a full-blown Home Assistant.
It's not installing Home Assistant, and it's not installing a broker. All it's doing is doing some clever stuff inside FPP, and publishing different registry or quote unquote MQTT keys to MQTT that then trigger things to happen in Home Assistant. So for Home Assistant, and I'll walk through this one more time, Pat, I don't know if you were here and I walked through the first time. So for example, for Home Assistant to know that ChromaFlake 1 exists and how to control it. So let me switch my video again to that camera. The only reason that this exists in Home Assistant, where I can just quote unquote toggle this one snowflake on and off, that only exists because I installed the Home Assistant plugin. I have set up in FPP settings, in MQTT settings. This is set up with the IP address and the username and password of my MQTT broker, which is what is running in Home Assistant, correct? So FPP has configured to know where the broker is, and all the plugin does is publish values to my broker that are values that Home Assistant is expecting to see when it wants to know, quote unquote, discover new things. So that plugin created the right sort of keys in my MQTT broker database to tell Home Assistant this ChromaFlake exists and how to control it.
Right. I was just getting more to the fact that because the way it's labeled in FPP, and maybe I should talk to the developers, it's like it's not really Home Assistant. You're not installing Home Assistant on FPP, and that might be confusing to people that are doing research. That's all. I was just trying to point that out.
Right. Okay.
Have you ever had instances where the FPP plugin did not do what you wanted to do, and you had to go through like YAML and REST through the REST API.
I've never had a problem from the FPP side that it wasn't doing something I wanted to do. I've had problems. So there's a little bit of a named collusion here, like Pat was sort of alluding to. There's the Home Assistant plugin. You install an FPP to publish your models to Home Assistant to be controlled. I also have a Falcon PyPlayer plugin through Hacks installed in my Home Assistant. And what that does is give me this media player tile to control Falcon PyPlayer like it's a media player. I think there is other ways to do this, but this was just the easiest way that I found, is that there's a Falcon PyPlayer Hacks integration that gives you that Home Assistant media player, excuse me, FPP media player tile. So that's how I have my now. So to answer your question, I have had problems with this Hacks integration, this FPP based Hacks integration, when it came to that media player tile. Because I think the first person who wrote that abandoned it, and I had to realize that I should switch to someone else's fork that was continuing to support it. But that was the only thing I've ever had a problem with as far as Home Assistant control of FPP. Okay. Did you want to tell us about something you experienced?
Well, so I've got I tried setting up the Home Assistant integration at first, and I didn't. It seemed like it wasn't discovering topics the way I thought that it should be, and stuff. And so I ended up just I found there's some post on the Home Assistant forums, I don't remember where it was, that went through setting up everything in YAML for interfacing with the REST API.
There's a checkbox somewhere that I'm trying to remember. I thought it was MQTT that basically says auto add to discovered devices or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't see here. Or maybe that was just under Tasmodo from what I'm remembering. But that could have been it. It's not something I remember very well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's been a year since I've, touched that. Got to brush it back off for Christmas, but yeah, maybe I'll take another shot at the Home Assistant plugin.
Other questions? Don't be shy. It's in the overflow menu of MQTT, I believe. Forgive me for not knowing the terminology. What's the overflow menu? Maybe it's this one, system options, enabling newly added entities. If newly discovered devices and continues should be automatically added. And you have to make sure polling is enabled. I think this is part of how Home Assistant works with every integration though. Kevin says that's the one, so that might help with making sure it's auto adding new stuff to it.
Newer versions of Tasmodo, I think, removed. It's not enabled by default, the Home Assistant discovery topic stuff.
Okay.
Like in the firmware itself in Tasmodo, like if you run the newest firmware.
I think I'm running the newest firmware.
Well, they have a new discovery protocol, I think, that their plugin integration supports by default now too. It's very confusing. Like they made a new discovery protocol that I think their integration supports.
Oh, shoot, I don't remember my password for Tasmodo admin. Nope. I don't know what my Tasmodo admin password is. Okay. Is MQT or Mosquito is the same thing? Someone answered that. Thanks. Are my show controllers on my IoT LAN? No, my show controllers are on my show controller LAN. So I do have, to be honest, I have not built all the firewall rules I should build to keep traffic from not crossing LANs. So right now my router does just let stuff route between LANs when requested. So my Home Assistant gets to my show controllers just by transversing my router between the VLANs. Any other questions? We had this is a 30-minute class. It should be ending in 5 minutes, but otherwise I think we can be done. How is Home Assistant funded? My last company, Insteon, went, oh, people are talking about Insteon. Kevin, we are brothers in our suffering with Insteon. So to answer your question, Kevin, Home Assistant is funded by obviously donations, but also income through what they call Nabu Casa. Nabu Casa is so Home Assistant value is running locally. It literally is running locally on a Raspberry Pi in your house, but some integrations require the cloud, like Alexa. Alexa, you can only tie to Home Assistant with cloud framework. The way you do, there is a way to do that for free with Home Assistant, or you can just pay Home Assistant $5 a month for their cloud services. And it's called Nabu Casa, and it just is, like 2 clicks setup, and now all the integrations that require the cloud will work out of the box. What you guys just used to get to my Home Assistant integration was Nabu Casa. So yes, they have a steady flow of money through offering that portal option. They do write guides for you not to have to use their portal. If you want to set up your own reverse proxy type setup. But I just donate, quote unquote, donate to Nabu Casa, and use that portal for all the cloud requiring integrations to work. Now, I think I saw a message earlier from you about Insteon. Insteon does have an interface, or there is an Insteon support in Home Assistant. When I tried it, it worked, but it wasn't super user-friendly. There was times where I was writing my own link tables out using Home Assistant, the Home Assistant interface, to program the link tables in my devices manually, which was rough, but at least nicer than trying to do the linking by running around my house. So yes, the backstory for me, Kevin, is I actually only got into Home Assistant the first time Insteon disappeared from the internet and all our hubs stopped working. My first immediate response from Googling was use Home Assistant to replace your Insteon hub. And that's the only reason why I got into it in the first place. Now I'm super happy that I did, because it's now made my house way more powerful for all the automations that I have for tying things together. But to be honest, I actually end up ripping all my Insteon out and replacing it with Wi-Fi, because I was still tired of some of the limitations of the Insteon system itself and having to deal with linking and unlinking and things like that. But yes, there is a pretty powerful Insteon integration in Home Assistant. Jason says you did the freeway. Well, why didn't you want to donate to Nabu Casa, Jason? But yeah, thanks for letting us know the freeway works. That's what was wondering how you got Home Assistant to talk across networks. Yeah, it's just all my networks still have the same core router, so that core router can let my networks transverse if they're set up to do that. But yes, I feel your pain. Yeah. Did you play with Lightorama REST API to control the software? Nope. I don't have any Lightorama stuff, so this is all FPP based. So everything in my presentation today was FPP. Any more questions? I think we got to call it in 1 minute. I saw one more person still flickering my snowflakes. $6 times 12 equals more money for Nintendo. I have no idea what you're talking about, Jason. Oh, for not paying for Nabu Casa. Yeah, but I want Home Assistant to have money. They make nice stuff. All right, I think we can stop.
Yep, 3:20. We'll call it a day. Bill Porter, I want to thank you very, very much for your presentation today and going into much more detail for us. And I think it's something that we could all pursue a little bit more with just a little bit harder detail in research. I appreciate everybody coming out. Thank you very much. And this